Perfectionism is often less about excellence and more about shame. You aren't merely trying to produce a great piece of work. You're trying to produce something that will finally make you feel safe from judgment. But perfectionism can paradoxically make us perform worse because if you're genuinely interested in learning something, failure is useful because it provides useful information. But if failure threatens your identity, you will naturally try to avoid it. And that can end up looking something like this. The fear of failure becomes procrastination, that becomes avoidance, that becomes rushed work, if that even happens, which becomes disappointment, hence an even stronger fear of failure. The most painful consequence is that we never even begin. We tell ourselves we're waiting until we are ready. But underneath it may be that we don't want to discover that we're not as good as we hope we are. And this perfectionism and procrastination so often travel together. We have to separate excellence from worth. When we no longer need our work to prove that we are worthy, we become freer to make genuinely excellent work. Because we are finally allowed to experiment and fail and be imperfect and receive criticism and yet keep going. So certainly, perhaps the deepest cure for perfectionism is to tolerate being an imperfect person. In your mind anyway. Once your worth no longer depends on being flawless, perfection itself becomes much less frightening and excellence becomes much more playful. If perfectionism is partly an attempt to escape the feeling that you're not good enough, then simply telling ourselves to stop being a perfectionist usually doesn't work. So we have to work both at the behavior and the underlying self-judgment. We have to separate the quality of the work from the quality of the person and deliberately distinguish doing something not so well from being a failure. Deliberately produce imperfect work. Give yourself tasks where completion matters more than quality. Not because you actually want a terrible result, but because you're teaching your brain that you can produce something imperfect and nothing catastrophic happens. As a perfectionist, you need that. And some people don't struggle with this. So you will gradually become less afraid of the gap between what you imagined and what you actually produced. Replace perfect with good enough. Good enough for the purpose. Because perfection has no natural stopping point. It has no natural stopping point. Also, judge yourself by the process, not the outcome, because what you can control is whether you showed up or not, whether you concentrated, whether you prepared, whether you learned, whether you tried again. You don't control how people respond. You don't control whether something succeeds. You don't control whether you're better than someone else. Whether circumstances cooperate is not up to you. Therefore, just do what is reasonably within your control. Notice the moment that perfectionism appears because it's usually a recognizable moment. I need to get this exactly right. Remember that mastery requires ugliness. And almost everything worth becoming good at has an embarrassing beginning. The beginner's work is supposed to be bad. Your job is simply to learn and continue. You can pursue excellence because you love the craft, not because you're desperately trying to escape yourself. The perfectionist cycle is usually something like, I don't feel worthy, therefore I work intensely, I achieve something, I gain temporary respect for myself, then the bad feeling returns, so I must work even harder. Manic work is particularly revealing because there is a difference between intense work and manic work. Intense work can come from enthusiasm, ambition, or curiosity, or even commitment. But manic work has an element of escaping it. The trap is the thinking that good enough keeps you moving. You achieve something, and instead of thinking that you're okay, then you ask yourself that what is next? Achievement is only providing relief. The tragic part is that you become extraordinarily productive while fundamentally disliking yourself even more. You might build a successful business, you might become highly educated, you might make money, you might create impressive work, and still feel quite not enough. The original problem wasn't actually a lack of achievement, but the belief that achievement is what makes a person worthy of respect. That's why some people become more successful without becoming more peaceful. Sometimes people work extremely hard because they are excited, because they are fascinated, because they are responsible. Maybe they are pursuing something genuinely meaningful for them. So ask the question that what happens emotionally if you stop working? If stopping feels like rest, that's one thing. But if stopping produces guilt, anxiety, and worthlessness, or a feeling that you're falling behind and becoming a nobody, that is the problem. We should work because there is something you genuinely want to bring into the world. Because the difference isn't really how many hours you work, it is what is driving the work and what happens when you don't work in your mind. A hard-working person can work extremely hard. And an overachiever can also work extremely hard, but the distinction is often psychological. An overachiever can actually become less effective than a healthy hard worker because they can't tolerate the normal cycle of you attempt something, then there's failure, then there's feedback, then there's rest, then adjustment, then you attempt again. They only want to attempt, then success, then validation. Only. So they may procrastinate until they can do something perfectly. They may overwork unnecessarily and avoid risk where they might fail. They usually even get burnout. Hard work expands your capabilities, but compulsive overachievement can eventually consume the person doing the achieving. Right? Overachievement says, I need to achieve something so I don't have to feel bad about myself. It happens quietly though. And the same person can move between the two, between being an overachiever and a hard worker. You might genuinely love what you're doing and secretly be trying to use it to prove your worth. The aim is to change the relationship you have with achievement. You want to become someone who produces, learns, strives, and grows without making achievement responsible for proving that you are worthy. That's the subtle element. Make your work an expression of yourself and not a verdict on yourself. Ask, what can I learn, create, solve, or contribute today? Let that be your mental point of origin. Adapt a process-oriented definition of success. Instead of measuring yourself primarily by outcomes, establish a few things that you can reliably control. For example, say today, I will do one most important piece of my work. Maybe I will spend some time learning. I will move my body. I'll take care of my basic needs. I'll give myself some genuine downtime. That way you've succeeded before you know whether the outcome will be successful. Focus on the actions. You can have a bad business day and still have a successful day. You can fail an attempt and still have learned something valuable from it. And rest is also not the opposite of productivity. Rest is part of the system that produces. So deliberately practice ending work while there is still more you could do, because there will always be more you can do. There better be. You're teaching yourself your nervous system that you don't have to earn permission to exist through productivity. And also, I have 2 videos on failure. Go watch them. Make failure ordinary. You need a relationship with failure that resembles the scientific method, where you try, you observe, you learn, you modify, and then you try again. Ask yourself, what did this attempt teach me? Failure can stop being a courtroom where you're judged and becomes a laboratory where you learn. Build an identity that is larger than achievement. If your entire identity sits on one pillar, failure can bring the whole structure down. A broader life gives achievement its proper place. It is important, but it's not everything. You don't have to spend your entire life desperately trying to become tolerable in your own eyes. You can become curious about what you're capable of. You can work hard. You can fail. You will. You can rest. And you can try again and become extraordinarily competent. So that's my message to you. Subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time.